All right, here we are with Harumi from Emrit. She's been gracious enough to take some time and walk us through basic kind of fundamentals of financial literacy. So welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, this is actually a really this is a topic that is really sort of like a passion of mine. And so I actually appreciate your giving me this stage to talk about anything around this financial literacy that I think a lot of people find very important too at some point as we kind of, we all want the financial freedom.
Yep.
But in order to get the financial freedom, I think getting that financial literacy is a very important thing to achieve. So
yeah. Well, let's start at the very beginning, because this is new to me as well. As here I am, 44 years old and embarrassingly ignorant about yet another topic. So
if we have solved every problem around financial literacy for everyone, we wouldn't be talking about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's start at the beginning. Is there a way that you define it? I was looking and seeing some people say there's 3 concepts and 5 fundamentals or whatever. Like, how do you think about financial literacy?
To me, financial literacy is everything that there's no one tool, 2 tools that you need to have or you can have that would allow you to understand everything that you need to know what you're doing with your money.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it might mean that, you need to kind of talk through your life. And for some people, it might be that something that your wealth manager kind of provides at the very early stage of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of calculate what you need to do, and then that's all you need. So to me, there is no certain set standard, anything that you can have that is one size fits for all. So we can talk about a lot of different things around financial management, your money, what we need to do in order to make a living. And then I think, that can go to many different directions.
Yeah. And in fact, I should probably make sure that folks understand who I'm talking to, because you and I have talked before on another interview, and I'm making an assumption that everyone has seen that and understands it. So maybe we'll rewind a little bit and start at the beginning. Could you tell me a little bit what you do at Emrit and then what your background is?
Absolutely. So the job title that I have at Emrit is called CFO, Chief Financial Officer.
Yep.
What it means is that I'm pretty much responsible to oversee anything financials that happen at the company.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for me to get here, I've done a lot of jobs around the finance. My career started as an investment banker in the front office. I did the derivatives trading, and then I also did some M&A for a few years before I switched into Fintech field.
Mm-hmm.
But it was long before the word like Fintech actually existed.
Right.
So I was a banker who switched into the technology side of the business. Did that for a number of years. But because I made my switch relatively early on, I got to do a lot of different things within what we call a Fintech today.
Mm-hmm.
I did product management, innovation program launch, business unit, running a business unit, everything around it. So that really gave me a broader perspective of what it means to be in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And, specifically finance, but really sort of more general business management, which really helped me to, when I switched into the small business side,
Yep.
kind of think about the company business in a more holistic way. While doing that, I also got the CFA designation quite some time ago.
Uh-huh.
We're not going to even talk about what year I got the designation in.
Yeah.
It's one of those financial qualification that you can get, which takes minimum 3 years to go through, because there are 3 different levels of tests.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of those designations that you add after your name with a comma, 3-letter words.
Yeah.
One of those things. Yeah. So I do have an experience around quite a few sort of finance aspect of life,
Mm-hmm.
profession. So that's what really drove me here today.
Mm-hmm.
I have previously worked at another cryptocurrency company, also as a CFO. CIOI stands for investment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I am right now, Emrit, as a CFO.
Okay. And where did you work before? What was there's like it was something that I think I've put some money into, like just using it.
Yeah, it's called Celsius.
That's right, Celsius.
And
yep.
it's a company that started as a crypto lending
Mm-hmm.
company, but now it does everything that we can think of within the cryptocurrency field
Mm-hmm.
that you can that you can put your cryptocurrency into to make money with it.
Yep.
So it's not just a crypto lending company anymore.
Yep. I think I've got a 𝗪𝐶 wallet. It sends me emails every week, and it's like, oh, you made an extra, whatever, 50 cents or buck or whatever it is. It's like, oh, it's an interesting thing to get into and check out.
Agreed.
Okay. So you said a couple things. M&A is mergers and acquisitions. That's just like buying companies and I guess rebuilding them or making them do what you want to do. And then Fintech is financial technology, just for the folks who may have never seen this stuff before. And
yes, thank you for defining them.
Sure. And that really means this Fintech stuff is not just like computers plus banking. It seems to me to be referring to kind of the next generation of how really banks are going to work in the world of the internet. Is that reasonable, or is there a better definition that you think of when you think of Fintech?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very reasonable way of putting a very easy explanation behind sort of fintech. So I think, what really happened, say, give or take, let's say 20 years ago or so, in our life in general, a lot more jobs that used to be done, not just in the financial services, but pretty much in any field. A lot of manual processes or something that used to require a lot more labor in the past kind of began to be more automated or began to be more so easier to handle. The technology really kind of began to come into the picture. And initially, I think they were just called technology, serving in those respective fields. But because there were so many different technologies that are popping up everywhere, not just in financial services, but in every sort of segment, I think you probably, a lot of you probably have heard of not just the fintech in some variation, but also things like, a med tech or health tech, legal tech, a lot of different
biotech, the whole thing.
Now XXX tech. So I just actually sometimes call it, I've been in the XXX tech for a while because I actually did touch upon a few other things than just the fintech.
Okay. So I think that gives us a decent background to understand where you're coming from. There was one other thing that you had said earlier, is something about like making sure your wealth manager will help you through this. Now, a lot of people watching this, exposure to crypto can change how much money you have, to be just totally frank about it. And it can really change how you think about money in general, because you go from what was like a normal job, and whether that normal job for you is paying 30 grand a year or 80 grand a year or 150 grand, like those are all kind of normal amounts for a job. Waiting tables, you wait on at the lower end, you're doing some lawyering stuff, you're up at the higher end. Most of us in those realms don't, maybe it's just me, don't have a wealth manager. So what are the things that you see? And then crypto can change that, right? Is that all of a sudden you get into a thing like HNT, and if you're in early in any of these things, not just Helium, if you're in early in Bitcoin or Ethereum, or whatever the next fancy thing is going to be, if it's going to be Solana or whatever, all of a sudden your normal goes from everyone else's normal to a very different normal, right? And you're looking at making money that you've never seen before. And, one of the things that I saw was just, man, I got to be careful not to squander this opportunity and behave in the ways that kind of kept me in the same bracket I'd been in for, 10 or 15 years before. So I guess maybe we start with like, what are the common mistakes you see from people who are probably like me, financially illiterate?
Well, Nick, first of all, you're not financially illiterate. Let's make sure that we make that clear. But I think even I, who have been in the financial services industry for a long, long time, having some of these cryptocurrencies, because I was also not the earliest adopter, but the relatively earlier adopter of, this currency, and how the sort of dollarized value, we call it dollarized because, just counting how many Bitcoins you have in your wallet, it doesn't necessarily translate into everybody's language, right? So when you try to put the value on that everybody understands, we kind of US dollarize, right? So when you dollarize that Bitcoin or whatever that you have in your wallet, and then you watch it grow, or sometimes just kind of gets really cold. But generally speaking, in the last, 10 years, it's just grown. it gives you a very different feeling, because like your hard-earned dollar, I mean, Nick, you said it yourself, like, whatever the money that you used to earn either as a banker or any other sort of normal corporate job, and then you make X $1,000 a year X $1,000 every year. You put that into the bank, and maybe you get lucky, you might get a little sort of equity that appreciated. You make what, 5%?
Right.
10%,
right.
And then that's a really good year, right, on your money.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, you could be talking about something that doubles in that same time frame.
Yeah.
And then that really kind of throws some people off. And even myself, I look at how much I had in my wallet one day, and then maybe like 2 months later, I said, I think I'm counting something wrong here, right?
Yeah.
That can easily happen. And for me, because I have spent many years making a normal salary, and then, putting it into regular financial institutions for many, many years, my instinct is more like, when I see something very volatile, for lack of better words, something like cryptocurrency, and it grows the way it sometimes does, my first instinct is, no, this can't be right.
Right.
But imagine those people who start their career, who start their bank account or wallet experience with that, and it becomes normal for those people.
Yeah.
That is a very different start of a wealth creation that you do to yourself. And then, great for you. I mean, hats off to you if that's how you got started and you got into one of those currencies early, so that, maybe at the age of, I don't know, 24, you managed to buy a house without any loan.
Right.
Great.
Right.
But would it be always there? Would it always be there? That's something that, we need to be cognizant. And you don't necessarily have to have a wealth manager per se, but, we also need to be thinking, this may not always be the case, right? If you're starting to earn money when you're 22, and then maybe you're going to be earning for the next minimum few years before you can retire, right? And then you let your wealth continue to grow. You kind of need to have a, stable something which doesn't go up and down just because somebody rumored to be this, or there's a bad story that, or we're just hitting the crypto winter, right?
Right.
So this is something that we need to we talk more in a little bit, but this is where the diversification minimum is required. Something that you is going to be stable, something that is going to be sitting there for you in case you have a rainy day. And then of course you are you're more than welcome. This is great to have something that potentially appreciates at a very rapid pace, but may not. It may also come down just as fast.
Yeah.
And then something that has a relatively steady growth, right? I mean, so you always want to be thinking about, what if my Bitcoin just stops growing tomorrow and just goes stable? What do I need to do?
Yeah. I mean, and we're humans, we live in these crazy times constantly. There's no stable time ever. But I think, maybe it's semi-useful to take just the example that I've seen. Is I went from kind of a normal job, doing my own thing, running my cookie company with my wife, get into Helium relatively early, September of 2020, August of 2020, early enough that it changed my life for sure. And now I'm looking at, and you may be horrified at this, is the most stable thing I think of is I split a validator. So there's 5,000 HNT went into a validator with the 𝗵𝗵𝘁. And I feel like that's kind of my stable investment. Now, maybe you're looking at that whoa, that is not stable at all. And then the rest of the other 5,000 or so that I had at the time, I put into a bunch of different cryptocurrencies, and I felt like that was pretty diversified. And it turned out that wasn't. That was a pretty terrible move. It's a great way to turn a lot of money into a lot less money. When you think of maybe those three buckets, is you have a really stable thing, you have a kind of a predictable growth thing, and then you've got your really volatile thing. Is that how you think of it, or are there more categories?
Um, that's probably without getting into real sort of details of equity this, fixed income that, money market this, cash. I think it's a relatively, I think, straightforward way of putting the finance. And by the way, I'm not a financial advisor, so I have to make sure that people understand this is not a financial advice, but kind of like a friendly talk that we are having, so that you can start thinking about your wealth and your income.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty straightforward way of thinking about your assets and how much you want to put into more volatile assets as opposed to something more stable. If you're very young, in case something happens to your volatile asset part, and maybe your wealth just kind of crumble down, you still have many, many years to recover. So, the chances are you can probably put a little bit more into the volatile assets than, say, somebody like me who has, who's already lived quite a few years. And then we are counting how many more years before retirement.
Right.
So, that's absolutely the right way to approach.
Okay. And I think of it in general as I've probably got 80 years on the planet. I'm a little over halfway there. And I feel like I was just talking about this with my buddy yesterday, is that we got into crypto at a great time where we're old enough that we should probably have known better to gamble so much, but we're young enough that now we've learned a lesson. It's like, okay, not going to do that again. Like I squandered a bunch of crypto gains just thinking I was smarter than the market. So it's a good time to be there, but I'm not the only person on the planet. So we got kind of, let's say, 4 or 5 buckets. As we got like the 20 to 30 year olds, the 30 to, and people in their 30s, people in their 40s, and then 50 kind of plus, where as you get older, you become more and more risk averse for good reason, because you just are less likely to be able to recover from that. Is there, certainly without being financial advice, is there a way that you think that someone kind of transitions through that part? Is there, like at 20s, are you just saying like, make a ton of gambles, don't worry about saving pretty much anything? Or are you more like, no, you should be saving, some small percentage, whether that's 10% or just leaving it at a small, leaving it at small? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, this also really depends. And, I don't want to sound like, oh, yeah, it all depends, but it really does depend because, you have to think about even the same, say, like 22-year-old, right? Or 25-year-old for that matter. They all have different life situations. Some people might have come out of college with a lot of debt. Some people might be already married with children. Some people are having really kind of putting themselves into really risky job situation, meaning maybe they choose to just go 100% proprietary way from the sort of entrepreneurial way from the beginning, and you don't have any sort of anything coming in steadily month after month. Right. So all these things really kind of go into that equation of what I need to do with my money. If you have a job that is bringing you relatively steady income, and I say relatively stable because there's no such thing as lifetime employment anymore, right? Nope. So, tomorrow you could be hearing from your employer, you're gone. Yep. So there's no such thing as 100% secure income or anything of that nature. But if you have a relatively secure income source, then maybe, and then you don't have any other obligations like children or debt to return, to pay back or anything like that, then maybe you can be a little bit riskier position with your money, right? Whereas if you are trying to get something going and then you don't have steady income, necessarily speaking, then you need to make sure that there's something sitting there so that you can pay at least for your food and whatever else that will go out of your wallet, will go out of your bank every month. So you really need to kind of assess your stage. Therefore, generally, right when you come out of college, and then you can always go back to your parents' garage or bedroom. Generally, we say, you can definitely take a little bit more risk than, say, people who are in the mid-range, 30, 40, when you have children, education, still probably loan, like a home loan, car loan, all these things where you need to be a little bit conservative. And then comes the sort of real silver age, golden age, where you really probably want to be mostly in fixed income, right? So, but everybody has a different situation. because you shared a little bit of your story, Nick, maybe I'll say, I am married, but I don't have children.
Yep.
So probably I can put my wealth into a little bit more risk-taking position than some people of my age who still have kids going through college.
Yep.
Right. So, that's a kind of situation.
Yeah. It's interesting because for a long time, my wife and I lived kind of paycheck to paycheck, just scrapping, running a couple businesses. And sometimes you do really well and you feel like it's not the PC way to say it, but you feel like you got the world by the balls. And sometimes you're like, man, I am way behind. And, through doing that, at least for my wife and I, that's how we enjoyed living, was just like super scrapping. That was super fun for us. Like, oh my God, are we going to make it? It's super close. Like, yes, we made it and we squeaked through. And sometimes we didn't. At one point we went bankrupt and kind of lost everything. And so that's obviously not for everyone. And as you're saying, it really depends on your outlook on life. And for us with no kids, I feel like, we could lose everything tomorrow and start over. And it wouldn't be what I'd choose to do, but I got a super cool partner and it'd be fun to kind of rebuild from that. Like no matter what would happen, we'd have a good time together. But that's different for everyone. I think it's pretty important to point out that there's this kind of standard advice that when you're young, you can be riskier, but you should still put a little away. And then as you get older, all the stuff you just said. And then there's what a bunch of us do, which is not that, right? I never had crazy savings and I never saved really anything. And I'd always be like, oh my God, now I've got 20 grand. Now I've got zero. Like, whew, that was a hell of a month. And that's maybe what normal people do. Maybe that's not normal. I don't know. But there's just kind of what you should do and then what reality is. So I guess one of the other pieces that I've got is we were talking to a financial advisor recently where we said finally said in my 40s, all right, I'm going to get my shit together and I am going to do the things that you're suggesting and any sane person would suggest you do. And as I talked to her, and she's super sharp, came with great recommendations. She's made a lot of people I know a lot of money. She's like, hey, you really should think about getting your money out of crypto and into more stable pieces. And so I guess one of the questions is how do I balance that advice out? Because she's not literate or not exposed to crypto at all. And from my perspective,
not crypto literate, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, it's you're crazy not to do that. But from her perspective, we're crazy to keep it in crypto.
Yeah, no, I think I know where people like that might be standing with regards to riskier assets. Mm-hmm. And, also it's something that, you can recommend with confidence. If you don't know, you cannot recommend with confidence, right? And then for those people, you have to be able to the best of their ability. Mm-hmm. They have to be able to almost calculate, okay, you have X amount of years probably left in you to work and then earn steady income. Yep. And your life expectancy is at the age X. And then therefore we need to make sure that you're going to earn enough money between now and then retirement years and to make sure that you have a comfortable life from retirement years onwards. Yeah. So in that, sometimes something very, very risky, quote unquote risky from mm-hmm. their point of view, crypto doesn't come into the discussion. Right. To me, because I obviously own some cryptocurrency, it's one another what we call investment vehicle, right? Right. So some people would put money into cash, and some people would put money into fixed income / money market. Some people would put a certain amount of money into equity, and some people would put money into other alternative assets. And that might be commodities, the metals, things of that nature. And, listen, even within some of these, what we consider the standard investment vehicles, mm-hmm. just a few years ago, there were some that were considered extremely kind of risky. Mm-hmm. For example, I was just thinking about one of the blogs that I wrote a couple of years ago, where I kind of ran the parallel between high yield bond mm-hmm. and then where cryptocurrency is today. Mm-hmm. High yield bond is now a part of everybody's kind of normal portfolio asset allocation. Within the fixed income assets, a little bit of money probably goes into a little bit higher yield bond. Although it's got a little bit lower credit rating, right? Because it does give you a little higher return as far as the fixed income is concerned.
Yep.
But it only became really kind of mainstream in the 70s, 80s onwards, when up until then, what was considered more stable credit rating companies kind of went down a notch or two in terms of rating, and then became high yield. People felt much more comfortable putting money into those bonds because they were once, very good credit rated companies that just happened to be going through a kind of like a bad economy or something, and then kind of fell off from that very high credit rating. And to me, dealing with alternative asset is kind of like an extension of that. So there was a point when a lot of these financial advisor people did not feel comfortable, let's say, with a high yield. Now it's part of the normal portfolio.
Okay.
And would cryptocurrency get there tomorrow? Maybe not. But for us who can perhaps afford a little bit of our portfolio to go into something that goes up and down like this, I consider it just another alternative asset. And because it's volatile, if you're a very conservative person, you might not put 50% of your assets into it, but you might put, 5%, where, you are taking a calculated risk, right? Even if this is going to lose most of its value, or maybe even zero, who knows? Let's say it's going to go down to zero. Can I still afford it? If the answer is yes, I think it's a very valid investment to make within your portfolio as part of the, sort of asset where you might be putting a small portion, but might give you a big return within if it goes to the right direction. And you are ready if it loses all the value.
Right. You're still going to put food on the table if you lose everything, which is that's pretty standard. I mean, one of the things I see is when any of the kind of normal investment people I talk to who think I'm crazy, and probably everyone watching this, because we're all in helium. Like, that's why you're watching this, is you're in helium or you're in crypto, is we think that people are, I think they're batshit crazy not to be in crypto. Even if it's just Bitcoin and Ethereum, just kind of the blue chips of crypto. It's like, how are you possibly not in that? And we're starting to see that more and more people are accepting that as reality. But it's everyone's got their perspective, right? And you'd said something about having cash as part of, I guess, your portfolio. To me, that seems at this point, man, that's like a big risk because how much money the US is printing. Now, I'm not like an economist by a long shot. Does that also seem pretty risky to you? Like maybe you've got whatever, X couple $1,000s of cash just to like, oh man, something bad happened. I can handle that. But you know that you're losing value on that over time. Does that seem reasonable, or is that like, am I totally wrong on that?
No, it is absolutely reasonable thing for people to be considering, because like what you can buy with, what the inflation does, right? Yep. What Nick is referring to is that what you might be able to buy with $1 today, if the inflation is very, very high, just like 1 month from now, you might not be able to buy it with $1. Your dollar today might only become equivalent of 90 cents if you were to have the same sort of like money today in your pocket, right? I mean, there's a calculation that goes into that. We're not going to get into that technical sort of future value or, anything of that nature. But I think it's a very easy one for you to also consider, right? I mean, if just by keeping the money in a bank account, 1 year later, $1 becomes $1.10. Imagine that, right? I mean, that's basically the inflation that you might be looking at. So if you're spending $1 today, you have to have $1.10 minimum a year from now in order to buy the same thing. So just having a cash in the account that doesn't bear anything, I absolutely agree with you, Nick. It is a risk by itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
on its own.
On the side of, because my wife and I have this other business, we sell cookies on the internet. We've been doing that for 10 years. I feel like that's our stable business, as rocky as that's been at points. And we just raised prices on the cookies. And so they went from $5 to $5.50. They're high-end niche cookies, gluten-grain, dairy-free, paleotreats.com. Go there. That's my little plug for them. but thinking that if someone, let's say you put, 5,000 in the bank, right? And whatever your number is, that's your number, but that could be a reasonable number to have for an emergency. Like you get in a car crash or whatever, your pet gets hurt, or your daughter gets hurt, like someone breaks their arm, you're just like, oh man, I've got to have a little bit of money. If you had 5,000 last year and you're buying my cookies, you could buy 1,000 cookies. And this year you can't buy 1,000 cookies. You can buy whatever it is, it's, I don't know, 750 or whatever the math is.
Whatever
right?
the inflation has devalued your dollar at, and that's how much cookies you can buy. And then this is only 1 year difference we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
We are talking about what you earn today, what you're going to have to live on 30 years from now.
Right.
And, if your money is not doing anything for you right now for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, how long ever you're going to keep that money in the bank account, that is the risk.
Huge
so you
risk,
need to make sure that the money grows somehow.
Now, is there a way for people to, I guess, how would I find someone who I could trust with money? How would you look at doing that? Or how would you recommend, just what are the boundaries or what are the parameters?
That I think is probably literally $1 million question. How do you really find somebody whom you can trust? I mean, there are people who do that kind of advice as a profession. And generally, those people do have the fiduciary duty, meaning they have to be thinking about the money for the customers, not for themselves. They don't make advice because it brings the commissions to them, but they are working with you so that they can make sure that you're going to have a comfortable life, right? So that's basically the nature of fiduciary duty. A little bit different, but sort of why the fiduciary duty exists. So there are people who do have to live by fiduciary duty, and then those are, and obviously some people that you go to get the professional advice. But even then, my advice to you, if you're looking for a financial advisor, is you don't necessarily always just go to the first person that you meet with. Go talk to them, find out if you feel comfortable with these people, because at the end of the day, you're going to be disclosing a lot of things potentially to these financial advisors. You have to feel comfortable. You have to be able to trust them. So for that, no, you never buy the first car that you see, right? Unless you have researched a lot already and you completely are in love with the particular car, then maybe you see the first car that you buy. But otherwise, you kind of shop around a little bit. Choosing a financial advisor or anything else for that matter works the same. You talk to a couple of people, you feel comfortable, you choose one.
Yeah, pretty common sense stuff. Is there something that if you sat down for coffee with let's say a kid out of college or someone who just started their family or someone like me, where do you typically see that they're most ignorant? Where do you walk away from the coffee and you're like, man, how are they getting that thing wrong? And however you break that up for different people, I'd love to know that.
Since I don't talk to many, people with the financial issues in one way or another necessarily, right? I mean, because I'm not in that profession. I think the general sort of observation that I think is often made is, I think generally speaking, a lot of people get too used to having whatever the kind of income coming to their way. And then they never think about, this might stop tomorrow, or I definitely will have one day sort of some kind of retirement and just spend everything that they've got. Right. I mean, you yourself said earlier that, there was a period of time when you were spending pretty much everything that came in. That's a fairly standard way many young people live. And there's something about it. You have to have fun. You have to have experience. You can't be just living today thinking that just because I'm going to have a very comfortable life 30 years from now, I will save every penny I've got. Right. That's a very boring way of living. Why do you live? So you have to find a way to kind of balance these two. But it becomes so easy, especially when you have a steady income coming in, to kind of spend everything that you've got. And that's one of the, I think, common mistakes. Maybe mistake, sort of way of living that I think general observation is made.
Interesting. Yeah, that's super helpful, is that we all tend to think that what we're experiencing now will continue on forever, even though our past experiences tell us that that's not true. Okay. So I got to start thinking about that for myself as well, which is, it's great. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that hopefully that people see this and they're like, okay, that dude seems like he has it together, but obviously doesn't. So if he can make a change, then I can make a change. And that would be my great hope with this and that's why I'm trying to be super open with the whole thing. And yeah,
absolutely.
Share a reasonable amount. Okay. So mistake number one is to think that what you're getting right now is what you're always going to get. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you think of? Maybe you sit down and, a son or daughter of your friend is like, hey, you're in the financial services world. I really want to get my shit together. I'm, mid-30s. Like where would I start? Is there a direction you'd point them in, or is it more like start reading books, or how would you guide that person in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, this is where the actually talking to people who do this for a living makes it a little bit easier, because they have all sorts of tools, right, that they can use to kind of, okay, so how much do you spend, every day on food, housing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay, so this is like, your monthly spend, and how much do you make now? Okay, so like, let's put that, and then how old are you now? And then you are like male, female, whatever. So you're expected to live up until this age. Mm-hmm. Let's kind of try to figure out what we're going to do from here onwards, right? Like they have a sort of built-in calculator analytics that they can use. But generally, I mean, that's not that difficult, even for you to do it on your own. Like, kind of do a sort of like track how much you spend. Oh, totally.
As you're saying that, I'm like, I'm a DIY guy. I'll make an Excel sheet. I'll do this on my own.
Exactly.
Is that
so? And then I can figure out, okay, so this is how much I make. Am I living within my means, mm-hmm. or am I not? Right? Because it's too easy to start putting everything into credit card, mm-hmm. and say, oh, this is one time, and I see something great, I'm going to buy this. But is it really like one time only, or you do that habitually so that it actually is a part of your monthly expense, recurring expense almost.
Yeah.
The things to kind of like take a look at. That's definitely some first step that you can take.
Okay, so that second piece then might be to just clearly look at what you're doing, and then make as fine an estimation as you care to make, right? And maybe that might be as simple as, hey, I'm 50. I think I'm going to live to 80. I got 30 years left. I probably got 15 years left of working. Here's what I can expect to make. Or it can be, okay, I'm, my life expectancy is this according to actuarial tables, and blah, like getting way deep into crazy stuff. However detailed you want to go, the main step is to clearly look at what you have and what you can expect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's always the first step of a problem solving, which is like, where your situation is right now.
Yep.
And then see how many different solutions you might be able to apply to solve the problem, right? Your life is the same thing.
Yep. Yeah. There's a famous Air Force Colonel, John Boyd, who had this thing called the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. And so he was really famous for applying it really quickly in dogfights and jets. But it's the same kind of thing. As you're looking around, you're observing, you're seeing what's around you, you're orienting yourself to what you're going to do, you decide what to do, and then you act, and then you go through the same thing again and again and again. Okay. That's pretty useful. Is there anything else that you think of when it comes to financial literacy? And it may be super basic stuff. You may assume I know it. I'll be honest with you, I probably don't know it. I consider myself fairly kind of financially illiterate, just lucky and hardworking, and I got here, but I couldn't say that I could, would go exactly the same way again. Are there kind of common mistakes that financially illiterate people make that you could pretty quickly remedy if they knew XYZ?
Absolutely. So we kind of touched upon this already, but definitely put your money into, several different investment vehicles, as we talked about. So just because I know I totally believe in Bitcoin, I totally believe in Helium, I totally believe in XYZ, and then don't put every single penny that you've got into single asset, right? I mean, if it's something that is not volatile at all, like cash, then, you're making a mistake probably in the long run because of the inflation effect that, if nothing else, right, that we talked about. And then if you put everything into like one asset that that happens to be very volatile, what if it goes to zero? So just about 2 years ago, right? I mean, the Bitcoin went from wherever it was to all the way down to $5,000 in just a minute. And, luckily at that time it came back up right away. But what if it didn't, and then you had all your wealth in that asset? Then what would have happened? Your worth would have halved more than halved
Yep.
in just like a minute. And what if it didn't come back up, right? So you always want to be ready for a really bad outcome. And so, make sure that you are somewhat diversified.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important. So we are now having this conversation in March of 2022. I forget, it's January, February. We had a pretty big dip. And
you mean this year, right?
Yeah, okay, this year. Yeah. Just a couple months ago. So we had this amazing run up until about December-ish. I'm not sure where the actual peak was. People who are trading are going to laugh that I don't get it quite right. But there was this kind of giant run up, and you couldn't not make money. Anywhere you put money, it went up, right? That was the kind of heyday of 𝗚 and Time Wonderland and all this crazy, 70,000% returns. And I think at that time was when I was talking to our financial advisor, and she's like, well, you should put something in with a high rate of return, get like 8% back. And I'm looking at her like, 8%? I wouldn't do anything for 8%. I'm looking at 7,000% or 70,000% over here. And it turns out that I was wrong and she was probably right on that. And I should have put a little bit more on the 8% side, but I didn't. But your idea of always being ready for the bottom to drop out, which it hasn't really, but just being ready for that stuff. And again, going back to your point of like, hey, just because you're experiencing it today doesn't mean it's going to be here in 2 months or 3 months or 2 years or 10 years. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, please believe me. I'm in the crypto business. So I do believe in this asset, and I do have quite a bit in a cryptocurrency. So like, unlike some of the, financial advisors, Nick, I'm not trying to take you away from cryptocurrency. Right. I'm just talking about, let's have some money in cryptocurrency, but let's try to look at other assets that make sense to you also. Yeah.
Yeah. And that I think it's kind of an exciting thing to think about it as a game. And just enjoy it, right? It's just like anything else, just like you're playing chess or checkers or World of Warcraft or Call of Duty or whatever it is. Like, how you keep score, soccer, football is just once you, and this is not for everyone, right? There's some people who are just scraping by, and that sucks. I've been pretty close to that. It's not a fun thing. And like, none of this stuff really applies for them. They just got to hustle, and there's no, like, the world's not fair. I wish it was, but it's not. But once you get to a point where you have a little bit of, I think what's called discretionary income, which just means, like, people love using big, long words, but it just means like it's money that you can spend or not spend. If you lose it, no big deal. If you buy a bag of chips and you eat the bag of chips, no big deal. Like, that money is gone, right? That's kind of the discretionary part, is you have the discretion to spend it as you like without any impact on your financial life.
Absolutely.
Right. Once you get there, then this stuff becomes really important to set you up in the long term. And that's just, I don't know, it's pretty hard for a lot of people to make that commitment to say, well, I won't spend the $5 on the bag of chips or coffee or whatever it is. I'll spend the $5 on some investment. But man, when you make that switch, it's a big deal. It'll change your life. And you see it happening, not in the course of days, but certainly in the course of months, and then obviously in years. So something super cool. And is that, I think that's what Celsius does, right? Is that I think what we ended up doing is, I forget what it was, like $10 a week, or like, it was some really small amount that we put into the wallet that buys Bitcoin, and you forget about it. And then all of a sudden you look at it 6 months later, a year later, you're like, holy shit, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, crypto lending companies such as Celsius, to date have been paying a lot more rewards than how much the banks, like a traditional finance, would have ever paid on the cash that you put into a bank. And, the good thing about cryptocurrency, right, is at least some of them, like, some of the bigger name one, like, Bitcoin, Ethereum, they're very liquid. So they are almost, in that sense, from the liquidity point of view, they're almost like a cash equivalent. So, that gives you so like, if you have some money in the very, very illiquid assets, like some securities that you can only sell, I don't know, once a year for whatever the reason, right? I mean, as opposed to having something like that, you can always go to exchange and liquidate your positions. So, that is something that is a little different from some other investment vehicles where, your trading hour at best on the best day, it might be limited to the hours when the exchange is open, right? So it's like 9 to 5 or whatever it is that each exchange is open.
Yep.
Bitcoin, you can trade 24/7.
Yep.
So, that's very liquid. Like, if you have some other currencies like less liquid, then let's talk about the proportion. But something liquid, you can probably keep a little bigger portion of your portfolio into it, and if you need to liquidate it, you can always liquidate it. So that's some like advantage that you have with
crypto. And just to make sure that that's understood, because we tend to think like, oh, everyone knows what liquid means. Liquid just means that you can take whatever you've got, whether it's Bitcoin or any of the cryptocurrencies, HNT, and turn it into something else. Usually we are turning that thing into, in my case as an American, US dollars, but whatever, British pounds, the euro, ruble, whatever it is, right? That's liquidity, is that you can easily do that. So an illiquid thing is like a house. It's pretty hard to turn a house into cash. You can do it, but it's not something where at 11 o'clock, I've decided to turn my house into cash, and at 12:30 it's cash. But Bitcoin or crypto.
And in case of you bring up a great example. Not only you can't cash it at like whenever you want, but it probably takes you a minimum few weeks, right? If not months, before you can actually find a seller, depending on what you've got. So
or buyer,
I mean, that's that. Whereas generally, like sort of traded assets, you can probably sell them for a cash in a pretty short period of time.
Oh, and there must be some kind of value calculation on that, like the liquidity of an asset there must be some kind of value piece to that, where investors look at that and say, like, something that is more liquid has some certain value versus something that is less liquid. And that, I guess that goes into the price. Does that sound right? Or is that more like advanced trading stuff and not worth thinking about?
For individual portfolio, not so much. I mean, if you're talking about institutions and then you're looking at like what kind of assets they need to keep on the book all the time, there are certain sort of liquidity measurement that goes into that. I have not necessarily seen the individuals. I'm really kind of talking about this from the aspect of if you have like 6 houses, it's a great example. If you every penny comes in, because you think that all the houses are going to appreciate. If you put every penny into buying a house, every time you get a little bit of money, then at the time of crunch, what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to borrow against these like sort of real estate or something. But even that, it takes a few weeks before you can take the draw. So what if you really need to cash tomorrow? There are situations like that, right? Oh my gosh, I didn't realize I need to make this payment tomorrow. And then you default on something. You definitely don't want to put yourself into that situation. So
okay, so that's another cool perspective, is that we talked about the perspective of basically how much the asset will return. So if cash, it's not going to return anything, but it's going to be super liquid. If it's a house and you're renting it out, maybe it returns some fairly steady thing. If it's crypto, it's totally volatile. And so there's a perspective of how much the thing will return. And then there's the perspective of how liquid it is. And so when we talk about financial literacy, I think a lot of it is just learning that these terms exist and that there are different ways of having a perspective. And you say, okay, there's not just one very simple, 3-step process to perfection. It's more like, hey, there's like 3 or 4 different perspectives that each have 3 or 4 different aspects. And then in those aspects, there's, 1, 10, 1,000 options. Where Bitcoin might be looked at as like super liquid, but pretty volatile. A house is illiquid, but not that volatile. All right. So now I'm kind of seeing how you might put it together. Is there any other like big perspective that you think I'm missing or a normal person would be missing as far as how to look at that? So we looked at volatility, we looked at liquidity. Is there anything else? On the financial side, you're like, oh yeah, there's one other big piece to this.
No, I mean, those are probably the things that come to my mind immediately. But then, like we discussed earlier today during this session, you overlay the stage of your life on that.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And then that would definitely determine the mix of what kind of things you're looking at to start with, too. So, yeah. And I know that for, that part, having a cryptocurrency as part of your portfolio mix definitely changed a lot of people's lives, since some people managed to earn so much. Little luck, I'm sure like it took a lot of courage to jump into, but a little luck there definitely. And then managed to buy a house straight out of college.
Yep.
Something like that obviously did not exist when we were growing up.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, I mean, definitely it was made a little different, but generally where you are in life.
Right. So time horizon might be the third one, is how much time you have.
Yeah.
How much, how likely it is you have this amount of time left on the planet, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, we shouldn't be like, this is exactly, that's exactly what you're thinking about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think those three things are probably really helpful just as a basic starting piece. And then someone watching this, you can make a decision from here and you'd say, okay, I'm going to go find a financial advisor. I'm going to go interview financial advisors. If you're like me, maybe you don't do that. I don't know, like I think of myself as like unemployable because I just can't take advice really well from or guidance from other people to do work. I love working with people. I don't like working for people. And I feel like with the financial advisor, they've got too much control, but maybe there's some portion of you or whatever you're thinking. For me, I just think like, okay, I'll give them a little piece to play with. That'll probably be my safe zone. And then I get to have kind of fun time with my stuff and maintain more control over it. But you got to figure out what's going to work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you have children, then there's an additional additional sort of side to it, right? How much do you want to leave behind for them, or how you want to leave it behind? Yeah. Since tax is a real thing that we have to deal with in this real life. Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's like estate planning. Yeah. Comes into the picture too. Yep. Yeah. Definitely. Like, we are not talking about giving a life advice here, so we're not going to go too much into that aspect of this. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of other sort of like financial literacy. I mean, this is like a financial literacy part one. What are you going to do with your money? And then there are like, then now that you're in the crypto and then you're talking about sort of like where can the crypto go? What kind of like investment methodology you have? What kind of different platforms you have? That is going to kind of like bring a completely different light to the conversation that we're having right now. But I think this is probably the one of the most important aspects, because we are talking about your life and then your money and how you're going to be making your living. Yeah. Possibly. Yeah. 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 And how comfortable or uncomfortable the life gets for you. Yeah. So, okay, cool. Yeah. I think that that's probably a good place to wrap it up. I'll give you a chance to kind of put your own bow on this thing. But I think, look, if you're watching this and you're anything, and you're in the crypto space, which you probably are, is just take some time and think about the options that you have in ways that you may not have thought about them before. Think about some of the stuff that Harumi and I have talked about and how that might apply to you to make your life better. At the end of the day, all the stuff that I'm doing and all the value I feel I've received is come from trying to help people understand what is a pretty new thing, right? Cryptocurrency is still super new. Helium is still certainly super new. We're all trying to figure this out together, and there are very few of us who really have their shit together on this. And so we can all kind of learn together and say like, hey, check this thing out. And whether it's how to deploy a hotspot or it's how to manage the HNT that comes in, we can all help each other kind of get better and figure this thing out and have a better life than we otherwise might have had. So Harumi, thanks for coming on. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with as far as words of wisdom, advice, like directions to follow? No, I think you wrapped it so nicely that I don't think I have anything else left to say at this time.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks a ton for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Great. Thank you, Nick, for giving me this opportunity to talk about this, I think, very important topic for everyone.
Of course.